When I opened my eyes yesterday morning, there wasn't a single bee left in the world. Literally not one. And sitting there in the quiet, I just knew. Something completely unimaginable was about to happen. Hey everyone, I'm Saddam and welcome to This Explainer. If you're into deep dives that explore some of the most terrifying yet utterly fascinating scenarios out there, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Because what we're unpacking today, it's a scenario that could quite literally rewrite the future of humanity. So let's just get right into it. I remember stepping outside that morning, and at first glance, honestly, everything looked totally normal. People were rushing to work, kids were running off to school, shops were rolling up their shutters. But then I noticed it. This incredibly eerie, heavy silence just hanging in the air. There were no buzzing sounds, no movement at all around the blooming flowers in my front yard. Just dead, still air. And then my phone vibrated. I looked down, and breaking news was just flashing across the screen. Worldwide, all bees have disappeared. My hands actually started shaking. At first, I kind of tried to rationalize it, thinking, okay, it's just the bees. What's so scary about that? But man, the real terror hadn't even begun. First week, everything felt normal. For those first 7 days, life just kind of kept moving. The public largely ignored the whole thing. Markets were open, fruit was everywhere, you could grab your morning coffee without a second thought, and chocolate was still fully stocked. People were even joking about it online, saying things like, well, hey, no more bee stings, right? And I'll admit, for a split second, I thought the exact same thing. But behind closed doors, panic was absolutely brewing. Scientists were desperately issuing these frantic warnings across every major news network, saying, not today, but the true terrifying effects are going to show in just a few short months. The biological clock was ticking down to a massive global shock, and they were dead right. 1 month later, the food shortage begins. So I walked into my local supermarket expecting the usual, but the whole illusion of normalcy just instantly shattered. Before this, I'd walk into aisles with these massive full shelves of fresh apples and vibrant strawberries. Now, I literally saw exactly 3 apples left on a completely bare shelf. The entire strawberry section was wiped out. And the almonds, since they're 100% dependent on bee pollination, they were locked up inside glass boxes like luxury jewelry. The shopkeeper just looked at me with these hollow eyes and muttered, no new harvest came in. That's the exact moment the horrifying truth clicked for me. Bees didn't just make honey, they built the entire foundation of what we put on our plates. 2 months later, prices explode. By the time the second month rolled around, this massive scarcity triggered a total economic shock. The confusion in the stores morphed into sheer panic. Prices didn't just creep up, they exploded overnight. Those everyday apples that used to cost me a single buck, they were now $5 each. Coffee tripled in price, and chocolate became this untouchable luxury. Grocery stores turned into war zones. I actually saw people arguing in the aisles over the last few wilted vegetables, while others just took photos of the absurd price tags and walked out empty-handed just because their paychecks couldn't even cover basic nutrition anymore. And then I witnessed something that completely shifted the weight of this catastrophe for me. I saw this little boy begging his mom for a simple, cheap chocolate bar. She looked at the price tag, looked in her wallet, and her eyes just immediately welled up with tears. She just couldn't afford it. We had crossed a really terrifying line. What started as an ecological issue had officially morphed into a desperate, agonizing human survival crisis. We were literally watching our modern comforts and our dignity just vanish into thin air. 3 months later, panic in the streets. By month 3, society seriously began to fracture. We're talking long, chaotic lines forming outside grocery stores hours before the sun even came up. Any fresh food sold out in minutes. People were frantically hoarding whatever canned goods they could find, and dark underground black markets started popping up just to trade basic veggies. I opened my own kitchen cabinet one night and realized fresh food was completely gone from my home. And the fear wasn't just in the streets, it was all over my phone. Social media became an absolute nightmare of rumors. Stuff like the government is hiding food vaults or only wheat and rice will survive now. The truly terrifying part, that wheat rumor was actually partly true. But surviving on just plain rice and wheat without the essential vitamins from pollinated crops meant our collective immune systems were on the brink of a total crash. 4 months later, the collapse of nature. I had to see the source for myself, so I drove out of the city to the local farms. And guys, where incredibly colorful flowers used to just blanket the landscape, there was nothing but dry, empty land. The trees had blossomed earlier in the season, sure, but they yielded absolutely zero fruit. The silence out there was haunting. Without the crucial pollination services that bees provided, we triggered a catastrophic ecological chain reaction that we were completely powerless to stop. Here's how it broke down. Step 1, the flowers fail to pollinate. Step 2, without those plants and fruits, the small herbivores begin to starve. Step 3, the larger predators now have nothing left to hunt, so they start dying off. Step 4, the entire global food chain utterly collapses. One single, tiny creature vanished, and that shockwave rippled upward to destroy the entire animal kingdom. Millions of years of perfectly balanced coevolution shattered in just 4 months.
5 months later, humanity tries to fight back. Realizing we were literally staring down the barrel of extinction, humanity finally mobilized. But our desperate attempt to play God and forcefully replace the delicate balance of nature, it was incredibly clumsy. Nature's original solution was flawless. Millions of bees perfectly evolved to carry pollen, working effortlessly for completely free. Our solution? Spending billions upon billions of dollars to deploy massive labor forces armed with tiny paintbrushes to manually pollinate flowers by hand. I watched the news footage of oceans of people sweating out in the fields, carefully brushing pollen onto blossoms one by one. And despite all that money and all that effort, our crop yields were still dangerously low. We simply couldn't outsmart or replicate nature.
6 months later, my biggest realization.
The epic scale of this disaster finally distilled into a deeply personal, quiet moment for me. I was sitting out on my balcony, looking over a hungry, exhausted city, and I decided to just plant a few small flowers in a pot, hoping against hope for some kind of miracle. A few stray insects fluttered by, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. We completely, arrogantly underestimated nature. We walked around so proud of our massive skyscrapers, our advanced smartphones, and our complex economies, but humanity's survival didn't rest on any of those grand achievements. It rested entirely on the smallest wings. The tiny, fragile creatures we paved over and took for granted were actually holding up the sky the entire time. The twist, a glimmer of hope. But then, just when everything seemed entirely lost, a new dawn broke. The sun cast this beautiful golden light right onto my balcony. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a mysterious silhouette resting gently on one of those tiny flowers I had planted. I crept closer, my heart practically pounding out of my chest. Was it a bee? Had a tiny colony somehow survived deep in the wild against all odds? Or was my exhausted, starving mind just projecting my own desperate hope onto a random shadow? To this day, I really don't know. But it leaves us all with the ultimate terrifying question. If every bee actually vanished tomorrow and this catastrophic chain reaction became our reality, would humanity actually survive? I want you to think deeply about that. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and please never underestimate the small things. I'm Saddam, and I'll see you next time.